Hi, this is Matt from Askia's London office. In this video I will show you how you can prepare a KES file for coding, add a coding project on the CCA, and then I will go on to show you what the agents see when they log into the coding application and show you some of the functionality that's available within the coding app. I have a KES file open here with some data in it, as you can see, and it has a couple of questions. The first being Q1, which is a closed question and asks the respondents what is their favourite beer. Various responses in there, including a none of these option. And the second question, Q2, which is an open-ended question and asks the respondent why. Now, the first thing that we need to do with this KES is to create an additional closed question using design into which we can code the open-ended responses. I'm going to call that Q2_coded. Indicates that it is a closed question and put some responses in, such as other, don't know, and not stated. I'm also going to indicate that this is a multi-coded question. I can now save and close the KES file. Now that we have created that additional question, we can create a task in Supervisor which points to that KES. Give the usual details, which is a working directory into which the data will be stored, and indicates that I want to save the data into that directory. And I'm also going to give the task or project a name which will allow me to easily identify it on the list of tasks in Supervisor. Click on OK, and after a brief moment we'll see that at the bottom of the list of tasks the new task appears. We now need to create a new coding group which we can associate with that task that we've just created. Now, this coding group we will call something descriptive and point it back to the task that we've just created. We then move on to the Context tab and select the source question, i.e. the question that needs coding, a context question if we wish to put those answers into context, and the target question, which is the question into which we're going to code the open-ended answers. We've also got the option of changing the interviews shown here and applying an additional filter to the questions that appear during the coding process. In this instance, I'm going to define that I don't want to see those who have said none at question 1, because in this particular data set they didn't get asked question 2 if they said none at question 1, so we don't need to see those during the coding process. So now that we have defined our task and created our new coding group, we need to assign some agents to that group in order to allow them to code the data. But as is often the case, you might not want to use your interviewers for the coding process, so you would want to define some new agents. So if we create a new agent here by right-click New and give that agent a name, I want to point them on this particular occasion to a different set of restrictions from our interviewing agents, and I've called those restrictions coding. And by opening the restrictions view and looking at the properties of the coding restrictions, I can see that I'm allowing agents with these restrictions login to coding, but not multiple logins, and the Act as Supervisor by default functionality will come into play in a future development. So now that I've created a new agent, I need to drag and drop that agent with those restrictions into the coding group that I created earlier, as you can see here. And now the relevant agent is ready to log in using their browser. So I'll select the username for that agent from my drop down menu and enter my password. Then either click on login or hit enter on the keypad. It will then show a list of the projects available for that agent to code, which in this example is only the one project that I've just created. But before we go on to look at that, it's worth looking at some of the other preferences, such as language, the remember me option, and most importantly the option to dictate the number of records that an agent gets through to code when they log into the project. That can be increased and decreased by changing the number or the slider, or indeed all records. So by clicking on code project here, or double clicking on the project itself, it will take us into the coding view, which displays various pieces of information and has various options, such as changing the language if you've got multiple languages, the answers given to any context question we chose to display, the details of the source question, the number of records that we have pulled through under that particular agent, which we can increase by clicking on the Get Work button here, and you can immediately see the effect that that has had. And it's displaying the answer list that we put into the pre-coded question we added earlier, with the option of making some answers exclusive. So the first thing I'm going to do is to start building my code frame by clicking on this plus button here, putting in a new code, giving it a label, something appropriate to the responses that I'm seeing, or the response that I'm seeing, adding perhaps another few options such as strength, as that's mentioned in the open-ended answer, and country of origin, because I'm anticipating that might be a regular response. Now at the top here where they've given their open-ended answer, we can see that it's in red, but if I select one of the responses I've just added, it changes colour to indicate that that record or respondent has been coded. And moving on to the next record, I can then start building further onto my code frame by adding some additional responses. Selecting them and moving on to another record. So you can see how we can very quickly build our code frame at the same time as actually coding our records. Another interesting feature though is the fact that if we decide at any point we've made a mistake, or realise we've made a mistake, such as putting in a duplicate code, we can simply use the undo buttons that are in the top right to go back a step, or multiple steps of course, as demonstrated there. Another interesting function within the coding app is the fact that you can look at various records and how they've been coded so far in the grid view, as I'm demonstrating here, which also has some useful drop-down filters to allow you to search for text that appears in the response. As demonstrated here. And also you can search for records that have been coded using a particular code on your code frame by selecting them from this drop down. And finally, if I go back into the coding view, you can see there are a couple of history options which will enable you to view what's been done so far on this project. And by clicking on projects, we can return to the screen which shows us the list of projects available for us to work on. Well, I hope you've found this information useful and it's given you some idea of what's available within the application, how to use it, etc. But as ever, if you want any more information, please contact support@askia.com, and because this is a relatively new offering from Askia, your feedback, comments, questions and suggestions would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much for watching.